pretty good event this evening. Although, I don't know, was it just me or did anybody else think that Ron Paul didn't get enough questions? But all in all, you know, I think we were well represented. We had two very strong Liberty candidates. Although I kind of like Herman Cain as well. I think he is. Yay! Although, you know, what do Ron Paul, Herman Cain, and Gary Johnson have in common?
Nothing.
They're all on my radio show. How many here don't know that I do a daily radio show? I do every day the Peter Schiff Show, and you can listen to it on SchiffRadio.com. I do it every day for 2 hours, from 10 a.m. to noon. But getting back to the presidential election, I think that this is probably going to be the most important election of our lives. And I think for some of us, it might be the last presidential election of our lives, because I think things could get so bad that a lot of people are going to leave. You know, back in the 1970s, people were going up to Canada to escape the drought. Well, if we don't do the right thing now, they're going to leave to escape taxation, to escape regulation, to escape inflation. Because we really are on the verge of a major economic crisis. We can't have, you know, an election where we have a Republican candidate who simply talks about, you know, what a great country we have and how America's best days are in front of us. Because the problem is, you might be right, our best days may be ahead of us. They may be 50 years or 100 years ahead of us. Some of us aren't going to live that long. We need to understand that we are on the precipice of a major crisis. You know, when I was listening to the debate and you hear all the questions that are asked and you hear the question, oh, look at these high gas prices. What should the government do about high gas prices? Gas prices are high because of what the government has already done. And gas prices aren't high because Obama has a bad energy policy. I mean, he does, but that's not why the gas prices are high. They're high because we have a bad fiscal policy and because we have a bad monetary policy. The reason that the price of gasoline is rising is the same reason that the price of food is rising. Absolutely. And why are we printing all this money? Because Congress is spending it. And the Federal Reserve is monetizing it. They can call it quantitative easing. They're monetizing the debt, and we're about to pay for it. The government has been papering over their mistakes. They've been sweeping the problems under the rug. There's no more room. You know, first we had a stock market bubble. Why do we have a stock market bubble? The Federal Reserve kept interest rates too low, and money was sent to the stock market. We invested in all kinds of crazy companies. We had all sorts of malinvestments. And when the bubble burst, did we allow the free market to restore balance to the economy and undo the damage done by government and cheap money? No. We came up with another round of government stimulus, and we inflated a housing bubble. And when that bubble burst, did we learn from our mistakes? No. We just did the exact same thing all over again. And now we have the biggest bubble of them all. We have a government bubble, and it's about to explode. And the consequence of the government bubble is that we've spread our paper money all around the world. We spread our treasuries around the world. We can't find enough private buyers, so the Federal Reserve is now the biggest buyer of government debt. But you can see how our monetary policy is poisoning the entire world. The inflation is a problem all around the world. You have people rioting over the high price of food. This is not a coincidence. These things are happening because of our monetary policy, and because the U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency, our monetary policy affects everybody's monetary policy. Because we're reckless and irresponsible, the world is reckless and irresponsible, and they're suffering the consequences. But what I think is going to happen in the term of whoever is elected the next president, although it might happen before that election. We are running out of time quickly. I don't know if we have 2 more years before it hits the fan. But what is going to happen is the world is going to wake up, and they're going to realize that it doesn't make any sense to use their labor, their capital, their scarce resources to make products for us and exchange them for pieces of paper that they can't use, that they can't spend, that they're just warehousing and watching depreciate. I think the world is going to come to the realization that the short-term pain of allowing the U.S. dollar, and by extension the U.S. economy, to collapse is going to be a lot less expensive for them than continuously propping us up. People keep saying, oh no, the world can't afford to let the dollar collapse because they have so many of them. It's precisely because they have so many that they're going to let us collapse, because what they're worried about is not the trillions that they already have, but the tens of trillions that they're going to have to accumulate to keep this going. We have now upped the ante so high that they're not going to want to play the game. And when it all hits the fan, who are they going to blame? You know, when the real estate bubble burst, that we had the financial crisis in 2008, capitalism got the blame. But capitalism wasn't the problem. If we had capitalism, we wouldn't have had those problems.
Right.
The truth of the matter is we had government that prevented the free market from functioning. We mixed capitalism with socialism, and that doesn't work. And whenever that happens, you get a disaster. And this disaster is going to be the biggest one yet. And it's important. It's very important that we have somebody like Ron Paul in the White House that understands that the government is the problem, and that the solutions are not more government, but more freedom. And we're not going to solve the problems that government created with additional government. We have so much of it already, we can't afford any more government. I mean, look at what the government is spending now. They're spending almost $4 trillion a year. That's more than twice what they spent. I remember in the late 1990s thinking government was too big back then. And it's twice as big now. And when this collapse happens, and we're going to have, runaway inflation, we're going to have high unemployment, much higher than we have now. We might even have shortages, the government might start imposing price controls. We are going to be in a very, very dire economy. It's going to be much worse than anything we had in the 1970s. There's a good chance it's going to be a lot worse than what we had in the 1930s. And what are we going to do? Because if we try to go to even bigger government, if we say, okay, the reason for this is because capitalism doesn't work, free markets don't work, we need to completely adopt a centrally planned status economy where the government allocates all the resources, the government decides who does what, who gets what, because this mess was created by free markets and capitalism. If we go in that direction, then that's it. Who knows what's going to happen in this country? And as I said, a lot of people might not stay here to find out, because it's not going to be a great place to live, especially if you're a young person looking to make a life for himself, looking to succeed. I mean, my grandparents, all four of them, came to this country in search of freedom. I don't want our kids leaving looking for the same thing. So we need to have somebody, Ron Paul, somebody that understands, that can articulate to the American public the source of these problems. Because even doing the right thing, unfortunately, is not going to be easy. And it's going to involve a lot of pain. But the only reason it has to be so painful is because we delayed it for so long. But the politicians, see, they don't care. They don't care about exacerbating the pain as long as it's later. Because to them, all they care about is the next election. But we have to care more about the next election. We have to care about the country. And not just our children, but ourselves. People keep saying, oh, we're leaving these big debts to our children. No, our children are going to leave these big debts to us, because they're not going to stay here and pay them. We're going to be stuck with them. And when the dollar collapses and we wake up and we find, what happened to our economy? We've got all these goods that come into this country that we take for granted. We didn't make them. How did we pay for them? We did it. We printed money. Well, what happens when we can't do that anymore? What happens when the world demands real goods for the goods that they send us? How are we going to survive? I wish I had got that question that Gary Johnson got about Donald Trump. Say, oh, he wants to put 25% tariffs on China. That's not a tariff on China, it's a tariff on America. The Chinese don't pay those tariffs. Americans pay those tariffs because who want to buy Chinese goods. Well, imagine when the Chinese goods aren't here anymore. Hey, it's not about us telling China they can't sell here. It's about China deciding that they don't want to. You got a billion people in China that would love to buy the things that are on the shelves in Walmart. Why aren't they buying them? Because their own government is artificially suppressing their currency. Well, when they let that currency rise, they're not going to have to ship those goods over here anymore, because they're going to have a billion people who can afford them. It's the Americans who are going to do without those things. And if we want to have an economy with a high standard of living, we have to produce. And how are we going to do that with a gigantic government? The only way that we're going to have a prosperous America, the only way our best days are in our future, is if we go back in our past and understand what made this country great in the first place. Because it wasn't government, it wasn't bureaucracy, it wasn't programs, it was freedom, it was individual liberty, and a constitution that kept the federal government in check. And we have to re-adopt those principles. And you have to elect somebody that understands them before it's too late, before it's lost. You know, I mean, exactly. Yeah. But anyway, and hopefully, this is probably the last time we'll be able to run for president. So we have to make it count.
That's right.
And some people said, look, we have to let the whole thing collapse. The important thing is we need to have somebody in that White House when it does collapse that's going to be able to explain to the American people why. Because everybody's going to be looking for who to blame. The politicians, again, are going to want to victimize people, just like they're doing now. You know, the oil price is going up. What do they want to do? What does Obama want to do? Let's have a commission to investigate the speculators that are driving up the price. They always want to blame the consequences of their bad policy on somebody else, whether it's capitalism, whether it's greedy businessmen, whether it's the Arabs. I mean, what do they expect? We debase our dollar, and they're going to keep selling us oil for the same money. You know, I made a point. You know, in 1971, when we were still on the gold standard, oil was $3 a barrel. Well, in silver, it's still $3 a barrel. It hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is we've depreciated the value of our money. So obviously, people have to raise their prices because we're the ones that are trying to rip them off and give them something for nothing, and they're not going to take that. But back to where I was, we got to get somebody in there, because as I said, when this hits the fan, we have to roll back government. We have to have someone in office that can articulate, look, there is light at the end of this tunnel. It doesn't have to be an oncoming train, but we have to understand that the solutions aren't going to be in government. There's no free lunch. Government's not going to create jobs. Government's not going to give us prosperity. We do that on our own. We create prosperity. Individuals working for their own self-interest. People always want to talk about jobs. You know, we got questions in the debate today. We need jobs. Yeah, where do you think jobs come from? They don't just drop out of the sky. Somebody has to create a job. I've created hundreds of jobs. Why do I do that? Because I'm just an altruist and I feel like creating jobs? No, I'm creating jobs because I want to make money. And I realize that I can make money if I hire people. But the problem is the government constantly wants to vilify people who hire people. They want to punish them. They want to make it more expensive. They want to make it more risky. And you know what? They stop doing it. The problem is, poverty isn't eradicated by government, it's created by government. When they try to redistribute the wealth, they destroy the wealth, and all that's left is poverty, and that's what they redistribute. So what we need to do is a clean slate. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people that were promised something from government who unfortunately aren't going to get it. A lot of politicians for years made promises that today's taxpayers can't keep, including things about Social Security and Medicare, and people have to be honest about these problems, that they don't work, and that we cannot bankrupt the country. See, my concern is if we try to keep all the promises, if we try to pay all the Social Security benefits and all the Medicare benefits, they're not going to be worth anything. What good is it if you get a Social Security check, but you can't buy anything with the check because prices have gone through the roof? It's better to deal with the problem and reduce the benefits, but make sure at least the money still has value so that people who maybe really depend on those benefits might have a shot of getting something. But to try to pretend that we can keep all these promises and not destroy the country in the process is wrong. And if we destroy the money, and if we have hyperinflation, which is where we're going, right? If we continue on this path, if we continue to print money and continue to monetize this debt, we will destroy the dollar. There's no question about it. The world is not going to go down with this ship. They will save themselves, and they will let the dollar fall. And when that happens, you look at all the things that have happened. I mean, look at what happened in Germany. Look at Adolf Hitler. What gave rise to an Adolf Hitler? It was the hyperinflation that the Germans went through in the Weimar Republic. I mean, obviously we're not going to get somebody that bad, but When people are desperate, they obviously, the government has always said, well, don't compare him to Hitler. But, was it Rahm Emanuel? You never let a crisis be wasted. But believe me, we're going to have a massive crisis here, and we can't let the government seize on that opportunity to bury capitalism and try to totally recreate this country in a socialist model, because we know where that leads. We know what that's going to do. So we have to have this fight now. We have to have a Republican nominee who can not only criticize the policies of Obama, but criticize the policies of Bush. President Obama, because he's following his playbook. He's doing the same thing. Bush created the precedent. All Obama did was expand the program. But we need somebody who can articulate why this is wrong. All right, I understand I've been talking too much. I only had 5 minutes.